7. Mudbloods and Murmurs. Harry spent a lot of time over the next few days dodging out of sight whenever he saw Gilderoy Lockhart coming down a corridor. Harder to avoid was Colin Creevy, who seemed to have memorized Harry's schedule. Nothing seemed to give Colin a bigger thrill than to say, "All right, Harry?" 6 or 7 times a day and hear, "Hello, Colin," back, however exasperated Harry sounded when he said it. Harry was awoken several hours earlier than he would have liked by Oliver Wood, captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. "What's the matter?" said Harry. "Quidditch practice," said Wood. "Come on." "Oliver, it's the crack of dawn," said Harry. "Exactly," said Oliver. He was a tall and burly 6-year, and at the moment, his eyes were gleaming with a crazed enthusiasm. "It's part of our new training program. Come on, grab your broom, and let's go," said Wood. "None of the other teams have started training yet, and we're going to be the first ones off the mark this year." Yawning and shivering slightly, Harry climbed out of bed. "Good man," said Wood. "Meet you on the field in 15 minutes. When he found his scarlet robes, he pulled on his cloak, and Harry scribbled a note to Ron, explaining where he'd gone. He went down the spiral staircase to the common room, his Nimbus 2000 on his shoulder. He had just reached the portrait hole when there was a clatter behind him, and Colin Creevy came dashing down the spiral staircase, his camera swinging madly around his neck, and something clutched in his hand. "I heard someone saying your name on the stairs, Harry. Look what I got here. I've had it developed. I wanted to show you." Harry looked at the photograph Colin was brandishing under his nose. "Will you sign it?" said Colin. "No," said Harry. "Sorry, Colin, I'm in a hurry. Quidditch practice." "Oh, wow, wait for me. I've never watched a Quidditch game before." Colin scrambled through the hole after him. "It'll be really boring," said Harry. But you were the youngest house player in the 100 years. Weren't you, Harry? Weren't you?" said Colin. "You must be brilliant. I've never flown. Is it easy? Is that your own broom? Is that the best one there is?" Harry didn't know how to get rid of him. It was like having an extremely talkative shadow. "I don't really understand Quidditch," said Colin. "Is it true there are 4 balls, and 2 of them flying around trying to knock people off the brooms?" "Yes," said Harry. "They're called bludgers, and there are 2 beaters on each team who carry clubs to beat the bludgers away from their side. Fred and George Weasley are the Gryffindor beaters." "And what are the other balls for?" Colin asked. "Well, the quaffle, that's the big red one, is the one that scores goals. 3 chasers on each team throw the quaffle to each other and try and get it through the goalpost at the end of the pitch. There are 3 long poles with hoops on the end. And the 4th ball is the golden snitch," said Harry. "And it's very small, very fast, and difficult to catch. But that's what the seeker's got to do, because a game of Quidditch doesn't end until the snitch has been caught. And whichever team's seeker gets the snitch earns his team an extra 150 points. And you're the Gryffindor seeker, aren't you?" said Colin. "Yes," said Harry. "And there's the keeper, too. He guards the goalposts. That's it, really." But Colin didn't stop questioning Harry all the way down to the Quidditch field. And Harry only shook him off when he reached the changing rooms. "I'll go get a good seat, Harry!" And Colin hurried off the stands. The rest of the Gryffindor team were already in the changing room. Woods was the only person who looked truly awake. Fred and George Weasley were sitting, puffy-eyed and tousle-haired, next to 4th-year Alicia Spinnet, who seemed to be nodding off against the wall behind her. Her fellow chasers, Katie Bell and Angelina Johnson, were yawning side by side opposite them. "There you are, Harry. What kept you?" said Woods. "Now I want a quick talk with all you before we actually get on the field, because I spent the summer devising a whole new training program, which I really think will make all the difference." The first board took nearly 20 minutes to explain, but there was another board under that, and a third under that one. Harry sank into a stupor as Wood droned on and on. "So," said Wood, jerking Harry from a wistful fantasy. "Is that clear? Any questions?" "I've got a question, Oliver," said George. "Why couldn't you have told us all this yesterday when we were awake?" "Now listen here, you lot," said Woods. "We should have won the Quidditch Cup last year. We're easily the best team, but unfortunately, owing to circumstances beyond our control..." Harry shifted. He had been unconscious in the hospital wing for the final match of the previous year, meaning that Gryffindor had been a player short and had suffered their worst defeat in 300 years. Wood took a moment to regain control of himself. "So this year, we trained harder than even before. Okay, let's go and put our new theories into practice," Wood shouted, seizing his broomstick and leading the way out of the locker room. Stiff-legged and still yawning, his team followed. They had been in the locker room so long that the sun was up completely now. As Harry walked onto the field, he saw Ron and Hermione sitting in the stands. "Aren't you finished yet?" called Ron. "Haven't even started," said Harry. "Wood's been teaching us new moves." "What's that funny clicking noise?" said Fred. Harry looked into the stands. Colin was sitting in one of the highest seats, his camera raised, taking picture after picture. The sound strangely magnified in the deserted stadium. "Look this way, Harry, this way!" "Who's that?" said Fred. "No idea," Harry lied. "What's going on?" said Wood. "Why is that first year taking pictures? I don't like it. He could be a Slytherin spy, trying to find out about a new training program." "He's in Gryffindor," said Harry. "And the Slytherins don't need a spy, Oliver," said George. "What makes you say that?" said Wood. "Because they're here in person." Several people in green robes were walking onto the field, broomsticks in their hands. "I don't believe it," Wood hissed. "I booked the fields for today. We'll see about this." Wood shot towards the ground, landing rather hard than he meant to in his anger. Harry, Fred, and George followed. "Flint!" Wood bellowed at the Slytherin captain. "This is our practice time. We got up specially. You can clear off now." Marcus Flint was even bigger than Wood. Ah, said Flint, but I got a specially signed note here from Professor Snape. I, Professor S. Snape, give the Slytherin team permission to practice today on the Quidditch field, owing to the need to train their new seeker. You got a new seeker? Said Wood. Where? And from behind the 6 large figures before them came a 7th, smaller boy, smirking all over his pale, pointed face. It was Draco Malfoy. Aren't you Lucius Malfoy's son? Said Fred. Funny you should mention Draco's father, said Flint. Let me show you the generous gift he's made to the Slytherin team. All 7 of them held out their broomsticks. 7 highly polished, brand new handles, and 7 sets of fine gold lettering, spelling the words Nimbus 2001, gleamed under the Gryffindors' noses in the early morning sun. Very latest model, only came out last month, said Flint. I believe it outstrips the old 2000 series by a considerable amount. As for the old clean sweeps, he smiled nastily at Fred and George, who were both clutching clean sweeps 5s. Sweeps the board with them. None of the Gryffindor team could think of anything to say for a moment. Malfoy was smirking so broadly his cold eyes were reduced to slits. Oh, look, said Flint, a field invasion. Ron and Hermione were crossing the grass to see what was going on. What's happening? Ron told Harry. Why aren't you playing? What's he doing here? He was looking at Malfoy, taking in his Slytherin Quidditch robes. I'm the new Slytherin Seeker, Weasley, said Malfoy. Everyone's been admiring the brooms my father bought our team. Ron gaped, open-mouthed, at the 7 superb broomsticks in front of him. Good, aren't they? Said Malfoy, but perhaps the Gryffindor team will be able to raise some gold and get new brooms, too. You could raffle off those clean sweep 5s. I expect a museum would bid for them. The Slytherin team howled with laughter. At least no one on the Gryffindor team had to buy their way in, said Hermione. They got in on pure talent. The smug look on Malfoy's face flickered. No one asked your opinion, you filthy little mudblood. Harry knew at once that Malfoy had said something really bad, because there was an instant uproar at his words. Flint had to dive in front of Malfoy to stop Fred and George jumping on him. Alicia shrieked, How dare you! And Ron plunged his hand into his robes, pulling out his wand, yelling, You'll pay for that one, Malfoy! And pointed it furiously under Flint's arm at Malfoy's face. A loud bang echoed around the stadium, and a jet of green light shot out of the wrong end of Ron's wand, hitting him in the stomach and sending him reeling backwards onto the grass. Ron! Are you all right? Squealed Hermione. Ron opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he gave an almighty blech, and several slugs dribbled out of his mouth onto his lap. The Slytherin team were paralyzed with laughter. Flint was doubled over, hanging on his new broomstick for support. Malfoy was on all fours, banging the ground with his fist. The Gryffindors were gathered around Ron, who kept belching large, glistening slugs. Nobody seemed to want to touch him. We better give him to Hagrid's. It's the nearest, said Harry to Hermione, who nodded bravely, and the pair of them pulled Ron up by his arms. He and Hermione supported Ron out of the stadium and across the grounds towards the edge of the forest. Nearly there, Ron, said Hermione. You'll be all right in a minute. Almost there. They were within 20 feet of Hagrid's house when the front door opened, but it wasn't Hagrid who emerged. Gilderoy Lockhart, wearing robes of the palest mauve today, came striding out. Quick, behind here, Harry hissed, dragging Ron behind a nearby bush. Hermione followed, somewhat reluctantly. Harry waited until Lockhart was out of sight, then pulled Ron out of the bush and up to Hagrid's front door. They knocked urgently. Hagrid appeared at once, looking very grumpy, but his expression brightened when he saw who it was. Been wondering when you'd come to see me. Come in. Thought you might have been Professor Lockhart back again. Harry and Hermione supported Ron over the threshold into the one-room cabin, which had an enormous bed in one corner, a fire crackling merrily in the other. Hagrid didn't seem perturbed by Ron's slug problem, which Harry hastily explained as he lowered Ron into a chair. Better out than in, he said cheerfully. Get 'em all up, Ron. I don't think there's anything to do except wait for it to stop, said Hermione, anxiously. That's a difficult course to work with at the best of times, but with the broken wand? Hagrid was bustling around making them tea. His boarhound, Fang, was slobbering all over Harry. What did Lockhart want with you, Hagrid? Harry asked. Giving me advice on getting kelpies out of a well, he growled. Hagrid moving a half-plucked rooster off the scrub table and setting the teapot. Like I don't know, and banging on around some banshee you banished. If one word of it was true, I'll eat my kettle. It was most unlike Hagrid to criticize a Hogwarts teacher, and Harry looked at him in surprise. Hermione, however, said in a voice somewhat higher than usual, I think you're being a bit unfair. Professor Dumbledore obviously thought he was the best man for the job. He was the only man for the job, said Hagrid. I mean, the only one. Getting very difficult to find anyone for our dark arts job. People aren't too keen on taking it on, see? They're starting to think it's jinxed. No one's lasted long for a while now. So tell me, said Hagrid, who was he trying to curse? Malfoy called Hermione something. It must have been really bad, because everybody went wild. It was bad, said Ron. Malfoy called her a mudblood, Hagrid. Ron dived out of sight again. Hagrid looked outraged. He didn't, he growled at Hermione. He did, she said. But I don't know what it means. I could tell it was really rude, of course. It's about the most insulting thing you can think of, gasped Ron. Mudblood's a really foul name for someone who is muggle-born. You know, non-magic parents. There are some wizards, like Malfoy's family, who think they're better than everyone else because they're what people call pureblood. He gave a small brrr, and a single slug fell into the outstretched hand. He knew it, and he threw it in the basin and continued. I mean, the rest of us don't know it makes any difference at all. Look at Neville Longbottom. He's pureblood, and he can hardly stand the kettle the right way up. And they haven't invented a spell our Hermione can't do, said Hagrid. It's a disgusting thing to call somebody, said Ron. Dirty blood, see? Common blood. It's ridiculous. Most wizards these days are half-blood anyway. If we hadn't married muggles, we'd died out. Well, I don't blame you for trying to curse him, Ron, said Hagrid loudly. But maybe it was a good thing your wand backfired. Suspect Lucius Malfoy would have come marching up to your skull if you cursed his son. At least you're not in trouble. Harry, said Hagrid abruptly, got a bone to pick with you. I heard you've been giving out signed photos. How come I hadn't gotten one? Furious, Harry wrenched his teeth apart. I have not been giving out signed photos, he said hotly. If Lockhart's still spreading that around. But then he saw Hagrid was laughing. I'm only joking, he said. I knew you hadn't really. I told Lockhart you didn't need to. You're more famous than him without trying. Bet he didn't like that, said Harry. I don't think he did, said Hagrid. And then I told him I'd never read one of his books, and he decided to grow. Treacle fudge, Ron? He added as Ron reappeared. No thanks, said Ron. Better not risk it. Come on and see what I've been growing, said Hagrid as Harry and Hermione finished the last of their tea. In the small vegetable patch behind Hagrid's house were a dozen of the largest pumpkins Harry had ever seen. Each was the size of a large boulder. Getting on well, aren't they? Said Hagrid. For the Halloween feast, should be big enough by then. What have you been feeding them? Said Harry. Hagrid looked over his shoulder to check that they were alone. Well, I've been giving them, you know, a bit of help. Hagrid wasn't supposed to use magic. He had been expelled from Hogwarts in his 3rd year, but Harry had never found out why. Any mention of the matter, and Hagrid would clear his throat loudly and become mysteriously deaf until the subject was changed. An engorgement charm, I suppose, said Hermione. Well, you've done a good job on them. That's what your little sister said Hagrid, nodding at Ron. Met her just yesterday. Hagrid looked sideways at Harry, his beard twitching. Said she was just looking around the grounds, but I reckon she was hoping she might run into someone else at my house. He winked at Harry. If you ask me, she wouldn't say no to a sign. Oh, shut up, said Harry. Ron snorted with laughter, and the ground was sprayed with slugs. Watch it, Hagrid roared, pulling Ron away from his precious pumpkins. It was nearly lunchtime, and as Harry had only had one bit of treacle fudge since dawn, he was keen to go back to school to eat. They said goodbye to Hagrid and walked back up to the castle, Ron hiccoughing occasionally, but only bringing up 2 very small slugs. They had barely set foot in the cool entrance hall when a voice rang out, There you are, Potter, Weasley. You will both do your detentions this evening. What are we doing, Professor? Said Ron. You will be polishing the silver in the trophy room with Mr. Filch. And no magic, Weasley. Oh, elbow grease. And you, Potter, will be helping Professor Lockhart answer his fan mail. Not, Professor McGonagall said. Professor Lockhart requested you particularly. 8 o'clock sharp. Filch will have me there all night, said Ron. No magic. There must be about 100 cups in that room. I'm no good at muggle cleaning. Saturday afternoon seemed to melt away. In what seemed like no time, it was 5 minutes to 8, and Harry was dragging his feet to the corridor to Lockhart's office. Ah, here's a scallywag, Lockhart said. Come in, Harry, come in. Shining brightly on the walls by the light of flames were countless framed photographs of Lockhart. He had even signed a few of them. Another large pile lay on his desk. You can address the envelopes. The minutes snailed by. Harry let Lockhart's voice wash over him, occasionally saying, right, yeah. The candles burned lower and lower, making the light dance over the many moving faces of Lockhart watching him. Harry moved his aching hand over what felt like the thousandth envelope, writing out Veronica Smelty's address. It must be nearly time to leave. It has to be nearly 9. And then he heard something quite apart from the spitting of the dying candles and Lockhart's prattle about his fans. It was a voice of breathtaking, ice-cold venom. Come to me. Let me rip you. Let me tear you. Let me kill you. What? He said. I know, said Lockhart. 6 solid months at the top of the bestseller list. Broke all records. No, said Harry. That voice. Sorry? What voice? That voice. Didn't you hear it? Lockhart was looking at Harry in high astonishment. What are you talking about, Harry? Oh, great Scott, look at the time. We've been here nearly 4 hours. I never believed it. Time's flown, hasn't it? Harry didn't answer. He was straining his ears to hear the voice again. Feeling dazed, he left. It was so late that the Gryffindor common room was almost empty. Harry went straight up to the dormitory. Ron wasn't back yet. Harry put on his pajamas, and an hour later Ron arrived, nursing his right arm and smelling of polish. Keeping his voice low to not wake Neville, Dean, and Seamus, Harry told Ron exactly what he'd heard. And Lockhart said he couldn't hear it? Do you think he was lying? I don't get it. Even something invisible would have had to open the door. I know, said Harry. I don't get it either.